Hey crafters, welcome back to my channel Because I'm Crafty. My name's Katelyn, and today I'm going to show you the first video in a little series of how to take in jean waists. And today I'm going to show you how to do it with a serged center back seam. So make sure to check out the other videos in the series. They will be posted very soon. I'll show you how to take in a flat felt center back seam, and I'll also show you how to add some elastic into the back half of the waistband. So as you can see in these pants, they are very big in the waist. This is always an issue I have with jeans. I have to make sure they fit my hips and my thighs and my butt and my legs, and the waist always ends up being way too big. So in this pair of jeans, the center back seam is just sewn, serged, and then top stitched. So I'm going to show you guys how to take in this type of jean. So first you need to make sure that you can unpick everything that you need and determine which spots to unpick it and how far down you need to unpick your center back seam. So the first step is to unpick your belt loop, because that is going to definitely be in the way. Then you want to unpick your waistband from the pant. Make sure that you have enough space to get inside. And just a reminder that if your tag is embroidered on, like mine is on these American Eagle jeans, that will basically disappear into your seam once you sew it. So if you do have a really nice pair of designer jeans that you don't want the back messed up, this is not the tutorial to follow. So once I have that all unpicked, I'll make sure I'll remove any other tags that are in the way. Then I can unpick the center back seam by removing the top stitching first. Can be a little bit of a tedious process, but it definitely is needed. You can check the underside to see if it is a chain stitch like this pair. If it is, you can just pull the chain once you find the correct thread on the underside, and that will help you take it out a little bit faster. If it is a chain stitch, you do need to remember later when we do go back to top stitch it and match up the original stitch lines that you want to make sure that you have a substantial back stitch to make sure to close that original chain stitch off so that it doesn't start to unravel on you at a later date. So when we pin this after we have it all unpicked, we want to make sure that we match up our yoke seam. This way it will look like a smooth continuous line, and it won't look like you've taken in the pants. Another thing to keep in mind, especially with blue jeans, is that jeans are often distressed after they've been sewn together and made. So if you are going to sew up a pair of jeans like this, you will be removing some of the distressing from that top portion of the center back seam. If this does bother you, or if it is really distressed and it's going to be super noticeable, just remember that that will affect the look of the finished jeans. For me, it doesn't really bother me too much, and this pair isn't overly distressed, so I'm not going to worry about that aspect. Now for the waistband, we're going to end up cutting it in half and then sewing it together. And by sewing it together and the seam allowance that we'll end up with, we'll make sure to bring it in enough to match up the pants when we sew that center back seam. So I'm just going to cut that in half now, making sure that it lines up with that center back seam at the bottom of the waistband. Now I'm just pinning my waistband together, making sure that I have the front side of the waistband right sides together and the underside or the facing side of the waistband pinned right sides together. And I'm just making sure that those original seam lines at the top and the bottom are pinned together so that when it's folded right side out, the top edge is nice and smooth, and then the bottom edge will fold in nice and smoothly as well. So then I'm going to go down to my center back seam, and I'm going to pin it in place where I want to sew it. And again, making sure that yoke is pinned nice and smoothly so that it matches up on the right side. then I'm just taking my ruler and a chalk and just giving myself a guideline for sewing, and then making sure I also have a smooth enough line at the bottom to match up with the original seam line. So you may have to unpick a little bit more to make sure that it gets nice and smooth, and that will ensure a better finished look. So over to my sewing machine, making sure to back tack securely on that original seam line, and then just giving a nice smooth taper to the top. Then just double checking to make sure that my yoke is nice and smooth. Then I'm going to sew in my waistbands, enough to make sure that they match up with the pant. Once I have those sewn, I will fold in the seam allowance to match up with the original fold line and pin my waistband back together. Then over to the serger, I'm just serging off the excess from my center back seam. I'm still leaving a bit more seam allowance than the original just in case, and I'm using the wheel on the side to roll over the extra thick yoke part. This will just help to make sure that I don't break my needles. So back over to my sewing machine, making sure that my waistband is pinned in place nice and smooth on the top edge, and I'm going to go back down to my center back seam and replace the top stitching. So I am using a thicker thread that matches the original on my jean to do my top stitching. If you don't have a nice thick top stitch thread, you can double up 2 threads on the top and put both of them through your needle, and that'll just give the look of a thicker thread. It's definitely a good tip to use, especially if you can't find the right color of top stitching thread that you need. So when you top stitch your center back seam, you want to make sure that you have the width between the 2 stitch lines as even as possible to match up with the original that is down below that you're bringing up to the top. And you also want to make sure when you go over that yoke seam that you're not pushing it up or down when sewing that seam. So it is a good idea to sew both of them from the same direction. So if you start further down and come to the top, then your yoke won't get pushed in opposite directions. So as you can see, I do have a little bit of extra seam allowance in that center back seam. That's because this is the second time that I took them in. I just needed a little bit more from the first time that I did so. So that's why there is a lot of extra in there. So now I'm just going back and pinning my waistband a little bit different just to hold it in place on that top edge. Then I can sew that together. Then down to the lower edge of the waistband, just pinning it in place so I can top stitch that back. And over to the iron, just giving it a good press. Make sure everything's sitting nicely and everything's nice and smooth. So as you can see here, that little bit of distressing does disappear into the seam. It's something I was telling you guys about in the beginning of the video. So as you can see here as an example, that's what I was talking about. But again, it doesn't bother me. I'd rather have my jeans fit at the top than keep the distressing. And back over to my sewing machine, I'm going to replace the belt loop back in place. This can be a little bit tricky to sew and pin in place just because it is so thick there. You now have the seam allowance from taking in the waistband plus the thickness of the belt loop. So this can be a little bit tricky. It can move very easily because of the thickness. So I normally do just hand wheel the machine to sew it going forward and backwards just so it's slower and I can see exactly what's happening. And you do want to try and make sure to line up the top stitching of your belt loop with the top stitching of your center back seam when you stitch the bottom portion down. and that is the last step for taking in these pair of jeans. As you can see, they fit much better at the back. It's nice and tapered in, and I don't have as much of a gap at the back like I did before. So I hope you guys enjoy this tutorial. If you have a different pair of jeans, don't worry, I have a couple more videos coming up. The next one, I'll show you how to take in the same center back seam, which has a flat felled seam instead of a serged seam. And then the following video after that, I will show you how to add some elastic into the back half of the waistband. So if you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already. Make sure to check out Instagram and Facebook. I hope you guys have a fabulous week, and I'll see you next time, crafters. Bye!